So a6, the move I recommend you play. After this move, there are two interesting options for white. Queen h5, it's quite a complicated variation, and the standard mainline knight takes c7. Other moves aren't as good. Bishop g2 is quite a common blunder. I've actually played this myself more than once. I'm ashamed to admit. Bishop b4 basically just wins on the spot for black, as after knight c3 or c3, black plays queen d3 with an easy win. Well, it's winning in the next move. d3 is also quite a poor move, as it allows black to simply swap the queens off and then capture the knight with a good position. So we'll look at knight takes c7 first, before moving on to queen h5, which is a more complex variation. In this position, after taking on c2, bishop g2. Now here I recommend d5. It's slightly better than bishop b4, which was the move that was originally played in this position, as playing bishop b4 first opens this bishop up to attack. After a3, bishop a5. It's quite a strong move here, which I believe was first played by Siggy Mannon, and which is e4. And this really takes advantage of this strong bishop on the h1 to a8 diagonal, and it puts black under quite a lot of pressure. My game against Siggy Mannon continued with rook c8, e takes d5, rook c2, sorry about the lag there, b4, bishop d8, and knight f4. And white's got a lot of pressure here. So to avoid that, black can play d5 first of all. And the point of this is that after castles, black will simply play rook c8 immediately, before moving the bishop out here, in order to avoid any problems on this diagonal. And after an exchange of rooks, now bishop b4. After a3 and manoeuvring, well, white can chase the bishop, just to remove this pressure on d2 to enable rook c1. Black sticks his bishop on c7, which is eyeing g3. It's not threatening to take on g3 just yet, as after rook c1, any move of the black bishop will allow white to invade with the rook. But it's certainly going to be a threat at some point in the future, so white has to remember this. The typical game could continue g5. Black's general plan in this position is to advance these pawns on the king side, trying to inconvenience white's minor pieces, while meanwhile white might try and make some progress on the other side of the board. Knight e7. Now bishop takes g3 really is a threat, as c8 is covered. So f4. Now say h5. Again pushing these pawns on the king side. And we've basically got an interesting game. Both sides have got their own plans and ideas, and the game's quite finely balanced. So back to this key fork. Queen h5. Very interesting move. At the same time that that Trojan Knight came up with this a6 move, I remember analysing this move first of all with Siggy Mannon, and it later occurred in a few games between me and Recursive, when Recursive was trying this move out. The main line would continue Queen d5, d6 and Bishop g2. Now, the point of this Bishop g2 move is to put this pressure on this diagonal. It's quite hard for Black to remove any pressure because he can't swap the queens off simply because all his pieces will drop. So he has to move his queen somewhere, or else knight takes c7 is going to come in. So one option is Queen g4. Unfortunately, this falls for a tactic, which is Queen f5, and after f6, Queen takes g4, and now b7 and c7 are both under threat. And after d5, Black simply a pawn down for no compensation. So Queen g4 is out of the equation. Queen b4 is the other option. Unfortunately, it's quite a good move for Black. Here, c3 is a very poor move from White, as after taking the queen, Bishop takes b7 is a very bad move, which loses to Queen e4, taking advantage of the weakened light squares. A better move is Knight takes c7. However, even after this move, after Queen a5, this b7 pawn still taboo because of Queen f5, and Bishop d5, f5. Again, Bishop takes g8, Queen d5. All these lines highlighting the fact that White can't live without this light square bishop. It's just defending too many key squares. And I feel here White doesn't really have enough play for the queen, although it may still be quite an interesting game. Instead of c3, White's best tries to play castles, and after taking the queen, now White can play Bishop takes b7, as Black doesn't have an immediate knockout blow against the light squares. While he may not have an immediate knockout blow, however, Black does get some good play after Knight f6. The point of this move is Knight to g5, which in the short term wins a pawn, actually loses because of this rook is opened up on the attack on h2. h4 loses immediately to Queen takes h4. A nice queen sacrifice there with the rook invasion winning for Black. And h3 loses to a similar idea, Queen g4, threatening to play Queen f3 and to sack the queen on h3, again opening up this rook. So with knight g5 impossible, White has to play f3 to prevent knight g4. And now after f3, Black can win a pawn himself and follow up with f5, which was necessary as f7 was under threat. Back when I analysed the Siggy Man, I think this was about as far as we went. However, in the next couple of years, I actually played a couple of games, as mentioned earlier, back against Recursive, and we reached this position on two occasions. One of the games demonstrates how careful White has to be, as that continued b3, which is probably quite a dubious move, but not disastrous just yet. Bishop g7, putting this bishop on a nice long diagonal. And now here was the real blunder, and that's c3, which loses to Queen at g4, which again takes advantage of his weak light squares. And if, well, White has to really accept the queen sacrifice. Castle's king side, sorry, and this rook's coming in with a forced win. In the other game, Recursive played a much better move, Knight d4, which cuts out any queen manoeuvres along this fourth rank. After Bishop g7, c3. The position's quite interesting, quite unclear position. The queen went back to b7, and castles. Now Black's aiming to just basically shove this f-pawn in White's face, and White in the meantime is just aiming to keep this queen under wraps and try and take advantage of his extra piece by developing the queen side. So it's quite an unclear position, lots of chances to both sides, which again you can't complain about that with black in atomic. Okay, so that's all for 2 knights e3, and the next video will be about 2 e4, which is a very interesting move as well. So I hope you come back to watch that video.